Welcome to episode 4 of QueerTrek, a Tricorder Transmissions LGBTQ plus community podcast. My name is Heather, and with me, as always, is my most favorite, Marty. Hi, Marty.
Hi, how are you?
I'm super happy to be back. We had a nice long break over the holidays where I was sick and had car trouble and moved and did a lot of things. So I hope your holiday was okay.
It was a fantastic holiday.
We just missed all of our QueerTrek fans.
We did.
That's all. That's all. Well, for those who are new to the show, QueerTrek is an LGBTQ plus community empowered Star Trek podcast where the topics come from you and your suggestions. Each show, our hosts will be joined by guests from the LGBTQ plus community who will share their stories while discussing subjects they choose within the scope of Star Trek's 52-year history. Stories will range from personal experiences, episode examinations, characters and themes in Star Trek, all from a queer perspective. If you would like to submit a topic idea, which we would really love, or if you want to be a guest on QueerTrek, send us an email at queertrek@thetricordertransmissions.com. On Twitter, you can message us. We're at QueerTrekPod, or you can use a submission form at queertrek.thetricordertransmissions.com. So get in touch with us. We thrive off of your ideas and we want to amplify your voice. So we'd love to hear from you. This is your podcast and we need you to make this podcast happen. So we also have a Patreon. Marty, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about Patreon?
Sure. If you want to support QueerTrek or the Tricorder Transmissions Network, you can head on over to patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And for as little as $1 a month, you gain access to exclusive early release recordings, unedited episodes, and you get to be a part of our patron-only hangouts that we try and host every few months or so. You also get some cool swag to come along with your membership. So as soon as you join, you'll be messaged for your address and we get to send you pins and bookmarks and whatever else we have in the storage bay.
We have a QueerTrek pin now too.
We do, yeah.
We just have to get on top of sending them out to people when that happens. But yeah, we love our Patreon family. You are what supports us here at the network. So it doesn't matter, $1, $10, $1 million. I don't know that that's ever going to happen.
I doubt it, yeah.
But we send heart.
Unless someone really, really, really likes us.
I mean, that would be amazing. But we'd probably donate most of it to charity.
We would.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Patreon. Thank you guys. Thanks to all of our patrons. And we hope that some of you will join our Patreon family soon. So tonight we are talking about /fic.
Woo!
I will admit I know very little about /fic.
Same here.
Okay. So we are both going into this with little knowledge and many questions for our guest. She is Kate Gardner, and she is an assistant editor at the Mary Sue. So welcome, Kate. We're so happy to have you.
Thanks. I'm super excited to be here. I'm a big fan.
I hear that you know a lot about /fic.
I do. Since it's about 10 years of reading it now and writing it.
Wow. Okay. So we will jump into that discussion very soon here. But first, I have some questions.
All right.
Because I'm a big fan of the Mary Sue. But I think a lot of our listeners probably, A, have no idea what the Mary Sue is.
That's me. Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay. And B, what a Mary Sue even is. So will you take a few moments to educate us on both the website and where it came from?
Absolutely. Well, themarysue.com is a feminist pop culture website, and we cover everything from books, movies and TV shows to some politics, some video game stuff, some technology stuff. And it's all through a social justice bent. We all try to bring our own unique opinions to everything. And it's a really great site. And it's full of really brilliant writers who every day are just coming up with, I just feel so blessed to be around because they're so smart and so eloquent. And I'm fangirling a little bit because I love my job. So the Mary Sue, really, if you're looking for pop culture and social justice combined, I would highly recommend checking us out. And then a Mary Sue is a term that originated with Star Trek fan fiction.
What?
Wow.
I know. Mary Sue is essentially Mary Sue is a specific term for women, but there's also a Gary Stew, which is what I call Batman because he's a Gary Stew. Actually, I call Batman a Mary Sue because I insist on reclaiming the term. I've even called James Kirk a Mary Sue. I wrote a whole article on it. Especially the Chris Pine version. Love you, Chris Pine, but
we'll have to get the article and link it in our show notes.
Oh God. But a Mary Sue is basically a female character who is incredibly smart, incredibly pretty, incredibly badass, but kick butt.
That's okay. I think badass is
badass.
acceptable.
Okay, I was trying to adhere to the no profanity rule, but she's basically overpowered, and everyone loves her. And there was an original parody fic with Lieutenant Mary Sue. And she saved the Enterprise and died dramatically in Kirk's arms. And everyone, including Spock, was so sad about that. And so basically it's now come to mean any female character who the particularly toxic section of fanboys doesn't like Rey from Star Wars would be called a Mary Sue. She looks at the camera and they're like, she blinked. Totally Mary Sue's blink.
And Rose.
Oh, and Rose. Yeah, Rose got called a Mary Sue. I'm sure that this particular part of Twitter had been around when the original series would have come out. Leia would have been called a Mary Sue.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Michael Burnham from Discovery is called a Mary Sue as well. So it's really just kind of a term that a lot of us, we at themarysue.com are very interested in reclaiming in sort of a positive way. Yeah. And that a lot of women on the internet are sort of taking back in a way where it's like, you know what? Yeah, you're going to call them Mary Sue. Guess what? Your favorite male character is probably also a Mary Sue by your standards. So
yeah.
We've reclaimed the word queer.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you still find then that there's a sect of people who still take a lot of offense at the term while you're trying to reclaim it? Because that's certainly something we deal with in the queer community.
I think that it's to a very lesser degree of the idea of reclaiming it, but I feel like there's still some people who'd be like, Rey isn't a Mary Sue, whereas I want to sort of embrace the idea that there's a bit of her where that's a little wish fulfillment, because we can talk about Star Wars briefly. For me, when I was younger, I wanted to be a Jedi so badly. Before I got into Star Trek and I wanted to go to Starfleet, I wanted to be a Jedi. So for me, seeing a female Jedi catch Luke Skywalker's lightsaber in one hand in The Force Awakens, I was crying my eyes out in the movie theater. So for me, when I'm like, yeah, there's an element of wish fulfillment there, but the same way Luke Skywalker is also wish fulfillment. Mm-hmm. In the same way that Michael Burnham is an amazing, awesome Starfleet officer, Jim Kirk is also an amazing, awesome Starfleet officer. So I feel like there's a lot of different ways. I'm babbling here, but so I think there are some people who are like, don't call any female characters Mary Sue. And I'm like, I kind of want to engage with that term. It's like for me with Trekkie as well. I know a lot of people like Trekker, but for me, I'm just like, Trekkie, it's kind of a fun, bubbly word. I like it. So I'm going to own up to being a Trekkie instead of being a Trekker, which
I don't understand the difference, but
neither do I, but I try to use both in my articles because sometimes people get mad.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of conversations about the words with people because we're just not having the conversations anymore, I guess. I want to say that there may have even been some sexism involved where Trekkie is a more feminine word.
Sorry, there actually is, now that I'm remembering this, because I was researching the crud out of Star Trek fandom a few months back, just because I was really, really hyper fixating on it at the time. And it was originally a term that male sci-fi fans used to derogatorily refer to female fans because they were like, Trekkies, it's like Beatlemania, you're running down the aisles screaming. And so I do think there is some sexism with the term Trekkie and Trekker. However, just at the point where I am in my fandom experience, I'm not about to start like shaming people for not using Trekkie or do any of that. I just think that we should examine the history of why people pushed away from the term Trekkie and why. But yeah, there is definitely a sort of a feminine element to that.
Yeah, I still come across people who prefer Trekker to Trek. I mean, it's usually social media where it comes up, and it's sorry guys, it's usually men that are like, I'm not a Trekkie, I'm a Trekker, but not always. Some of the OG TOS watched it as children still hang on to Trekker too. But yes, to your point, we're not going to shame anybody for using either. They're both fine, and you can be a Trekker, a Trekkie, a Trekette, a Trek girl, a Trek boy, like whatever you want to be. But yeah, the history and etymology of the words is always something that's super interesting. So I think we'll hop into our discussion here.
All right.
So please, Guru, tell us what is slash fiction and what is its relation to Star Trek?
Slash fiction and Star Trek, I think, if you're ever studying the history of pop culture and fandom culture and Star Trek, they're always going to be intertwined, because it was with Star Trek that slash fiction was sort of the term slash fiction was even born, and B, slash fiction came into the public eye. And I'm sure there were, because of the fact that we have the strongest record of online fandom starting with about Star Trek outside of the Sherlock Holmes people storming the streets when he got killed off bit. Star Trek is sort of where we begin seeing the discussion of queer characters in the text. So slash fic itself is essentially the romantic pairing of two male characters. So Kirk and Spock, if we want to go Marvel, Bucky and Steve, if we want to go Star Wars, Finn and Poe. All of those would be examples of slash pairings, and slash fic is any fic that explores them in a romantic context. And I just want to briefly, and this is probably something I'll touch on later, say that it's not just about sex with these fics. A lot of the best fics are coffee shop AUs. I actually wrote about a coffee shop AU recently that was it's an OT3 slash fic with Kirk, Spock, and Bones, where Kirk's a barista and Spock and Bones are professors, and they all fall in love.
Oh my gosh,
that's cute.
Seriously, if the authors listen to this, you know who you are. I love your fic. It's my favorite Star Trek fic. But that's an example of a slash fic. It's something that examines the characters in an emotional and a romantic setting, and it's not just purely about sex. Now, there are sexy fics, and those are awesome and valid, but also they're just more. I feel like there's a bad rep that slash fic is just about two characters making out, and that's not what it is about. It's about the exploration of two characters' relationship.
Yeah. Can I pop in really quick? Just because we're a podcast, so we're not a visual thing. Slash fiction, when we refer to it and are writing it, it's usually like Kirk slash Spock, which is where the slash comes from.
I was just going to ask about that, actually. Thanks for bringing my mind.
Yeah. I didn't want.
I was talking. Yeah, the backslash is how you identify that it's a romantic pairing, whereas if it's an ampersand, that's more like a friendship fic. Like, Kirk ampersand Spock. That's just going to be them, being bros. Kirk backslash Spock is going to be them, doing the Vulcan finger touch. I'm trying to do it right now.
My meld. And
so is that the biggest difference then between slash fiction and fan fiction?
Yeah, I mean, they all sort of fall under the grand umbrella of fanfic, but yes, that would be the biggest difference. And slash fic, that was how you could tell what was supposed to be romantic slash fic versus just platonic fan fiction. And there's different types of. There's also fem slash, which is what the usual catch-all term is for pairing two female characters together. Like Uhura Chapel has a pretty big following.
That made me gay. I need to read some of that.
Yeah, I never knew that.
Uhura actually, and I know we're going to bring up this article later, but there's Uhura actually became sort of like with fan fiction. There were a lot of female authors who would write fan fiction about them having adventures with Uhura, not necessarily like romantic adventures, but like they'd write themselves into the episodes, and they'd be with another woman instead of having them just be like the only girl on the team, which I think is. When I was reading an article with Alyssa Smith's article on Star Trek fan fiction, that just I think I did the Kermit arms flailing at how much I love that detail.
Yeah, I will quickly shout out. I am going to make sure this gets posted in our show notes. But if you Google Star Trek slash fic or slash fiction, it's probably going to come up. And it's an article for the Colorado Springs Independent written by our friend Alyssa Smith, who is at Alyssa, which is ALISSA S1701 on Twitter. And it's a 50-year-old Trekkie bestows Star Trek history upon the next generation, how fandom and fan fiction sparked the galaxy's most controversial romance. It is a very long and wonderful article, mostly based on an interview with a Star Trek fan who is pretty prominent in the development of slash fic and fanfic. And I call it the feminist Star Trek movement, even though whether you want to say it was feminist or not, that's your own prerogative. But so much of Star Trek's fandom originated with and was powered by women. And so I believe that, Kate, you can confirm that women were really the ones that started the slash fic movement.
Absolutely. Women were so key to not just the fan fiction movement, but to the slash fiction movement. And I think that's something that's really important because we talk a lot about if we want to even go back to the idea of like the Trekkie versus the Trekker, there's the stereotype of it being, some guy in his mom's basement with this like model ship. And that's sort of the parody of what a Trek fan is. But it started off as being like a predominantly female watched show. Women were the ones who were organizing the letter writing campaigns to save the show in the first place. Women were the ones, and this is one of my favorite stories. My favorite episode of the original series is The Empath from season 3.
Ooh, yeah.
I love that episode so much, probably because it was DeForest Kelley's favorite episode apparently, and because it's a great Bones episode, and Bones is my favorite character. So, and that was written by a female fan. She pitched the episode to NBC and they bought it from her. She had no writing credits.
Wow.
And I honestly, this is probably gonna be the first time that I start tearing up while I'm talking about this stuff. I want to write for sci-fi someday. So when I found out like that a woman had written that episode, and actually over 20% of the original series episodes were written by women. Mm-hmm. So when I was finding that out, I was like in tears because I was like, wow, this has been so pivotal to my development for years. And this is started by women. And so this is very much, when you're talking about slash fic and modern fandom, you are definitely talking about the efforts of a lot of women who were keeping the show alive. They were organizing conventions. They were sending out zines. They were using their own money to print the zines.
Yeah.
And so, but now slash fic was obviously at the time not something that people wanted widely known about because obvious reasons. So there were definitely like closed mailing lists where women would exchange slash fiction. And there was actually for a time slash fic and slash content was banned. And slash content is just the catch-all term for I'm going to use for queer content was banned on convention floors. So you couldn't like go to a stall that was selling zines and be like, hey, can I get some Kirk Spock? And it's really interesting just to think about these zines actually, because I remember in my freshman year of college, I took a history of science fiction class and we went to the collections, the fourth floor of the library, and they had original Star Trek zines there. And I picked one up and it was this very weird Kirk Spock fic, but there was art in it, hand-drawn art.
Oh, wow.
And it was a relatively thick book as well. Like it wasn't like a pamphlet. It was definitely sizable. And I think just sort of reflecting on it now, I have so much respect for these women who kept this culture alive and who were pouring their hearts and souls into this. And in a way, this sort of defined how we view modern fan culture, because it's like Star Wars had fanzines too, and that was born out of the Star Trek movement. We have a lot of the terms that we use today to talk about sort of like catch-all shipping and stuff like that. We were born in Star Trek. We have fan conventions and fan culture mostly because of what the Star Trek fans created. And so really we have these women to thank for their contributions. So the way every time you tweet like a flaily Kermit arms and include a GIF because your favorite Riverdale couple got together, that can be that the sort of like the etymology of all of this can be traced back to Star Trek. And these women, and I just think that because fan culture is oftentimes portrayed as like socially inept Big Bang Theory guys,
Yeah.
it's great to have just to sort of realize the history and all these women who created fandom.
Yeah. And there's some books out there they're in storage right now that I own, that talk about like the creation of Star Trek conventions and all of the women involved there. And from that and from some of my research, I came to understand that so really you had, the first 3 seasons of Star Trek and that was it. And so we were kind of, we as fans were kind of left with, well, what do we do? How do we make more Star Trek? Like, how do we get more Star Trek? And so the women came together as fans, as whether that was actually hanging out together or corresponding being via the zines or mailing lists or whatnot. But it was kind of like in that downtime, they wanted to create their own Star Trek, and /fic was born. I don't know that I am educated enough. I really am not, to talk about whether any of those women were queer. I don't know. I've not read if they were. Do you?
I actually am not confident enough to have a blanket statement. I do think that we could probably assume that some of these women were queer, and that for them, it's sort of, I'm going to go back a little bit in history. It's like how there were some queer women who wrote lesbian pulp literature. I wrote my senior essay on this for college. And that would be how they could tell their stories. And they'd have to like put it with like a terrible ending and everything, because of that's how the censorship at the time. But this was how they were able to tell their stories, even that they had to follow a framework. And so I have to assume that there were queer women who were writing Star Trek /fic. And even though they probably weren't out, they still were using this as a way to explore their own experiences.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think is really powerful about fanfic, because even though I'm 25 years old, so I was like right at the cusp of when LGBTQ characters were starting to be included in media. But when I was coming to understand my sexuality, there was like Jack Harkness.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
So
I love Jack Harkness, though.
I love Jack Harkness too. Do not get me wrong. I love Jack Harkness, but there was like, and I was too young at that and didn't have Netflix streaming. So it's like, not like I could watch Queer as Folk or The L Word, like that. So for me, /fic and sort of understanding about the LGBTQ plus community through queer fans talking about their experiences and writing /fic. And it's interesting because I say 10 years, it was Star Trek 2009 was my first like major online fandom and was my first /fic fandom. It was McCoy Kirk, because Carl Urban and Chris Pine had that great chemistry.
Oh yeah.
Team Star Trek 09. Woo woo.
Star Trek 09, and I was not Star Trek Into Darkness, and then Star Trek Beyond was so great, and Chris Pine come back. But for me, so that was a fandom that really opened. I really would not be in the job I have today, with the degree I have today, with everything that sort of is going on in my life, if I didn't have the beginnings of fandom and media analysis and critique through that fandom. And then /fic being something that I was talking about. Because then I was watching the original series. I was reading like the Wayback Machines of like old Kirk Spock fic that had been digitized, old Spock McCoy fic that had been digitized. Because I'm weird and I like all the weird pairings.
Well, I mean, weird is good here, so I don't know why I'm saying don't say it.
And also, for those of you out there who ship spoons too, you are valid. And that summer, I vividly remember the summer of 2009. Just like I rented all the original Star Trek movies from Blockbuster at the time.
Wow.
I know, I'm so old.
What? Who? What?
I know. What? It wasn't on streaming? They're all on Stars on demand now, and I literally got a subscription to Stars just so I could watch them like regularly, because I love the original Star Trek movies. I wrote an article about why all of them are fantastic, including The Final Frontier, because you know what? Kirk, Spock, and McCoy sit around a campfire singing "Row, row, row your boat," and if that's not the most beautiful domestic fluff fic that you've ever read in your life, I don't know what is. I really just love Star Trek, guys.
We all do. So you're with family.
But oh, goodness, golly gracious, I've lost my train of thought. But basically, coming back around to fan fiction and the Star Trek community is that for me personally, as a young woman who was just sort of like trying to figure out her own sexuality, slash fiction and the community around that was really important for me because it gave me an outlet to sort of read and learn and understand in a way that I don't think I would have really understood had I not had it. And then when I got into college and I eventually came out, that was, I can trace the root of that back to being able to sort of figure out what, like, sort of have queerness normalized for me in a way that media wasn't normalizing it for me. Because I wasn't raised in a homophobic home at all. My parents were very liberal, but I just didn't have the media access. And until we have queer stories that are just like on with like parody with straight stories, we need a way to normalize it. And so for me, it was slash fiction at the time. And so being able to, I think it was like Star Trek, and then it was like Supernatural fandom, Sherlock fandom, Marvel, like all the big Tumblr. I was a super Hulac, okay? I was on Tumblr.
All the time.
My blog though, so you can't find me.
Bye, Tumblr. I want to just go back super quickly and rewind and say that whether or not some of the women who wrote these fanfics, and I'm sure there were men writing them too, but as far as the question of whether some of the women were queer, and we can assume that, yeah, sure, some of them may have been, it's also totally valid and legit for straight women to write, slash fic and
absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to. I think we all know that. I just want to emphasize that.
Let's make it clear so there's no misunderstanding. If you're writing slash fic, as long, I guess, if it's not like underage characters or like gross stuff, please, you are valid. You are valid to ship these characters. And I mean, I in high school was the straight quote air quotes there, girl shipping slash, but I think that there's just, I don't know, fandom space is so interesting for me to analyze. And there's some just, I love that there's starting to be more like fan studies done, because I think it's such an interesting thing to look critically and analyze. We might be answering those questions that we're asking had we had that kind of, insight into fans of old. But it is sad that, you had mentioned, number one, the first fanfic I saw mention of, I think in the wiki article about Star Trek slash fic, was one that apparently was privately circulated, and that was The Ring of Shosham by Jennifer Guttridge, and that was 67, 68. And then the first known publicized circulated one was Diane Marchant's A Fragment Out of Time. Have you read either? I haven't read either. I'd heard of A Fragment Out of Time. That one had definitely popped up in the research I've done. I hadn't heard about the first one, though that makes sense from the timeline it would come out, because Amok Time was what really kicked it all into gear.
Yeah.
Did I pronounce that right? Oh, God. Okay. Yeah. So I feel like I'm about to have like...
I think it's right. That's how I say it. But I mean, other people say a different way. So when it comes to some Star Trek words, I'm just like, own it. And however you want to say it is how you want to say it.
That's how I have to do it at Reading Trek, because there are so many alien names. And they don't come with pronunciations in the novels. So you just... You take a stab at it and you commit to it.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll just go with all of that. But yeah, even though, like, say we just assume that these writers, if they were queer, were closeted, regardless of that, just for writing this type of fiction, they were not only was the slash fic banned from conventions, but they even discouraged the writers not to go to the conventions.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, no fun, no good. And I have to go dig up, because I was really curious just about like pushback and reactions from Star Trek community and from the people creating Star Trek and what they thought. And unfortunately, a lot of what I've seen, especially from the past, is like super negative because of the time and all. And even though I think once we get to the 70s, there's, a little bit more sexual freedom, but being gay, being queer, still not something that's
absolutely
identified as or acceptable when you're not at an orgy or on drugs. Sorry, I don't want to offend anybody with my 70s stereotypes.
I mean, if we want to talk about that, just like, I remember, and because it's 2016, 50 years exactly after Star Trek first premiered, when Sulu was revealed to be gay in Star Trek Beyond. And I remember the pushback to that. Mm-hmm. But I also remember sitting in the theater and, oh God, I'm definitely going to talk.
I don't. And go for it. But
he reflected on screen that Sulu had a husband and a child and was happy, and his sexuality, we didn't do bury the gays. We didn't have like all sorts of like the sort of the trauma that goes in a lot of times with queer stories in the media, because apparently that's the only way people can write our stories. And it was just presented as something totally normal and something, and I was crying that entire movie for a variety of reasons, but I remember like grabbing my mom's arm and like squeezing it because I was just so overwhelmed. And then we had Discovery come out, and I think that it's such an important step forward, especially because there's so many franchises that haven't even introduced a gay character on screen yet, or have introduced them and then immediately killed them off. And it's like, this is the type of stuff that we need to be thinking about. And this is the type of, because this representation does matter.
Yeah. The /fic mattered for you.
It did.
I didn't really understand my queerness until I made friends who were queer. Being pansexual or poly, like I didn't even know what polyamory was. I knew what polygamy was. Didn't know anything about polyamory until I had a friend who came out as poly and started learning through her writing. And so, thus I said, oh, I understand this about myself now. So just how the /fic worked for you to help you understand your own sexuality and identity, a simple moment and Star Trek Beyond is going to do that for young people out there. And I think that one of the things that gets missing for people who don't have queer friends or just don't understand the community is that you don't need to be a gay man for that to have an impact. Like, I'm not a gay man, I'm a queer girl, but seeing that moment on screen, I was also there crying and just super emotional, because it's like, we're finally here. And you know what? There certainly is a divide. There's pushback even within our own community from people who are like, well, this was just a token gay. Like, it's here for no reason. Sulu's never been said, has never been framed as gay in the past, etc. And that is valid if you have that opinion. But
absolutely,
for a lot of us, it was still just super amazing to see ourselves as the queer community, not just me, the pansexual poly person. I don't need that exact representation. I just need to see my community in Star Trek, and I got that. And that brief moment, which I have to say, another great part was the fact that like Kirk was accepting of it. Kirk was watching him. It was a loving moment. It was a moment of admiration too. And it shouldn't have to be that, oh, well, because the captain was that way, we should all be. But at the same time, it is meaningful that character, observed his friend in that way and kind of sent that message out.
Absolutely. And I think that sort of ties back to one of my favorite Jim Kirk quotes from the original series, which is, leave your bigotry in your quarters. It has no place on the bridge, which is one of my...
that line.
Going.
Cryptography is working on it, sir.
Everything's Spock.
Didn't quite get that, Mr. Sound.
Nothing, sir.
Repeat it.
I was suggesting that Mr. Spock could probably translate it for you, sir.
I assume you're complimenting Mr. Spock on his ability to decode.
I'm not sure, sir.
Well, here's one thing you can be sure of, mister. Leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge. Do I make myself clear?
You do, sir.
God, I think that was the moment when I was rewatching the original series and that line happened, and I think I'd missed it my first go around. And when that line happened, I was like, Jim Kirk gets a bad rap from people, but this is that's a neither here nor there with. But actually on the subject of the Sulu moment, I remember I was interviewing someone for a piece on representation in Star Wars, actually, and he was talking about his daughter who was queer, and he said that was a moment for both of them to experience Sulu being gay and beyond, because she had dealt with homophobia and nastiness, and he had sort of watched that, but they both were able to see how important that was. And so he's a really, whoever, if you listen to this for any reason, I hope you're having a good day.
Yeah, sorry we're tangenting, but it's all queer talk, so it's
and also I wanted to go back because I just was thinking of this, talking about women in fandom. There's a great moment in the demo reel for a Star Wars documentary, Looking for Leia, which is about women in the Star Wars fandom, where an older fan talks about how she's digitizing the zines. And I think that's another reason why we need to sort of like look to your elders. It's like talk to the older women in fandom, because like they've been around for like the birth of the internet, because it's like we can go on an archive of our own and click on a pairing name, and most of the time you'll get like so much content. Like when I was like, okay, I kind of want to read some Kirk McCoy fic again after rewatching the first Star Trek 2009, I sort of like went there and was like over 100,000 fics.
Wow.
Like,
yeah.
Oh, if I want to read the specific niche, like, Joanna is there, and it's like a high school AU or something. No, Joanna wouldn't be there in a high school AU. God, please cut that out.
No. We can if you want. No big deal.
Just cut it. Or like Joanna is there and it's Christmas on the Enterprise. If I want to read that particular fic, I can read that particular fic, and I could probably read 20 of that particular fic. And there's some pairings that are small. Like I was in a fandom that had 6 people in it once.
Wow.
I'm not going to tell you what the fandom was, because then you'll be able to find my fanfic. But it was a tiny fandom, and I wrote it was slash fic for that too, and it was really interesting because there was a couple differing ideas about what the pairings were, and it was interesting to take people's different queer or straight readings from people, because there was one character who I was like, he's bisexual, and everyone's like, he's straight, and I was like,
not in my world.
No, I have this. So I just think there's so many interesting layers to this. So if you have any more questions, please. Otherwise, I will babble for.
I think my biggest question is, and maybe you've answered it because you said, you got into slash fiction when you were younger, but was there anything specific where you were drawn to the pairing, and so then you went looking for it, or what is it that really pulled you into slash fic?
I think it started as me liking specific characters and then wanting to see them. Like, it was weird because like I just found out about fan fiction itself when I was in 6th grade.
Okay.
It was Harry Potter fan fiction. And then I started reading Lost fan fiction because we just had to make the show crazier. And then it was Heroes fan fiction. And then I think I have like a weird like dated memory of like tracking my life.
That's
by
awesome.
Fandoms. So I don't remember what it was between Heroes and Star Trek, but I was reading there was some Batman, there was some Dark Knight fanfic, but that was mostly character studies about Jim Gordon, because Jim Gordon is my favorite DC character. Haven't written slash about him yet. Who knows? Gotham is out there, so maybe I'll watch that show and be inspired. But it was with Star Trek, you couldn't escape slash. And so when I was first going on the Star Trek live journal communities, because this was
way back when.
That's that's like dawn of the internet almost.
There was Kirk Spock, Kirk McCoy, Spock Bones. I mostly stuck because I just didn't know slash fic at the time, and I was like not exposed. So I was reading mostly Spock Uhura at the time, which like I never got the backlash to, because I came into Star Trek in 2009. So I was like, this is cute. And everyone's like, no. And I was like, no, it's cute. So then I remember there was a Kirk McCoy fic where they got married on Space Vegas. And I
There's
don't know.
Space Vegas.
There was a Space Vegas, and I read it and I finished it and I was like, I ship it. I
wish I could screenshot your face right there. That was so good.
Just in case our listeners don't know, can you explain shipping?
Oh, shipping is like you like their relationship, so you want them to be together. So it's like, I ship this. And sometimes you can like do like, I friendship this, or I hate ship this. But like I wish there was a better platonic term, because there's some characters who I'm like, I love their relationship, but I don't want you to think I ship it. Yeah. But if I'm saying I ship it, it means I want the two characters to hold hands. So yeah, with Kirk McCoy, it was that one fic in Space Vegas, and I was like, this is fantastic. Oh my God. And then I just spent like the rest of the summer reading slash fic and watching Star Trek, which is why I had so many friends in high school. My friends from high school are going to listen to this, because I'm going to post about it on Facebook, and they're going to be like, Kate. And I'm like, yeah, well, there were like 4 of you, and you guys came down the line. So, but Star Trek slash fiction was but I have definitely had things where I'm trying to think of what it was. Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson from Captain America, the Winter Soldier. I immediately walked out of the theater and everyone was like, Bucky Steve. And I had like AO3 Archive of Our Own open on my phone. I was like scrolling through the Sam Steve tag, like, yeah, this is great. Bucky's great. Bucky's great. Yeah, everyone on your left. But I have definitely had things where I have liked I've come out of a movie and immediately been like, oh, there's got to be a fic for this somewhere. Or it's like a lot of times it's an older movie where I will sit there and I'll be like, either there is fic or there would have been fic. Like, oh God, I can't remember his name, but at the end of, it's in Louis, I think it's the beginning of A Beautiful Friendship. Casablanca has some queer subtext. You know there would be fanfic out there today if that movie dropped today. Yeah. And it's so interesting, or it's like, I don't know. Yes, there are certain things that I have walked out of something and gone, oh, I need to see if there's fic for this, but some of them are very specific. So again, I'm keeping my cards close to my chest for some of these, because people will look me up and be like, that I know that. It's that chick.
So it's really like about the excitement of seeing two characters that you feel gel really well, and you just really want to see them together, either as friends or as BFFs or as friends with extra or in love or some aspect.
Absolutely. There's sorry.
No.
But no, yes, that is exactly what shipping is about. It's not just about like, I mean, and there are some things where it's like you sort of are like, yes, those two characters making out would be excellent. Let's see that. But at the same time, there are certain things where it's like, I want to see this relationship explored more in depth. And a lot of times these are characters who are sort of like Horatio and Hamlet, where it's like there's a queer, there's like some subtext there, but obviously it's not going to be portrayed in a romantic light in Shakespeare's play or really any adaptation I think that's ever come out. So when you are looking for fan fiction of that, it's exploring what the narrative could have been. Yeah. And even with modern things, like why can't Captain America be bisexual? Why can't Tony Stark be pansexual? Why can't Thor have a relationship with Bruce Banner after he's had a relationship?
Thor is so gay. It's all gay. Or it's queer.
Everything. Oh my God. And it's very much, or with Star Wars, it's like, why can't Poe Dameron be gay? Why? And this is something, it's like, why did his sexuality have to take a backseat in The Last Jedi? But we can have because sexuality isn't important to the characters at this time, but we have the director describing Rey and Kylo touching hands as being a sex scene. So it's like, that's stuff like that I think makes people go to fanfic, because we want to see these relationships explored in depth. And like, shipping isn't an exclusively slash thing. Like I ship Steve Trevor and Diana Prince from Wonder Woman, and I've read fanfic for them, and it's like, yes, you can ship straight couples too. Equal opportunity shipping. Just don't be gross about it. I think that's my like good fandom mantra is don't be gross about it. And
yeah, well, and there's some that is gross about. I mean, I like no pedophilia, please. Like,
yes, that's
not
what I
that
mean
kind of gross.
That's what I mean by gross. Like,
yeah,
that's exactly where I'm going with the
yeah,
gross.
like that stuff. And I'm, I'm sure it's out there. Like, I didn't look, but I'm sure it is because the porn is out there. So yeah,
like, don't do abuse, don't do that type of stuff, and just feel like, like there is going to be relationships in fiction that are really interesting, and you want to see those explored more. And fan fiction is a great way to sort of express, like, I connected with this work, and I want to explore it more. And so, and Star Trek just happens to be like just have a long storied history of fans looking at the text and being like, I want more. I'm connecting with this.
It's a whole other episode, but you could go through and talk about the relationship between Kirk and Spock and where the queerness is, and you could talk about where the queerness isn't, and how that really drove. And we may just need to do another episode, or we'll be here all night. But
I could actually dive in. For me, something that I think is interesting is that there's an element there where with all of the triumvirate, there's not like a macho, like, oh, you're okay, Bones, I'm gonna like slap you manlily on the shoulder, and not like, it's like they hug, they touch, they engage with each other at an emotional level. There's no like suck it up and don't cry. Spock is like a Vulcan, so he doesn't cry. But there's no like Kirk being like, you got to man up. There's none of that. There's an openness and there's an intimacy in those relationships, which is why people are sort of invited to, I think, have a queer reading of these texts. And I think actually, if I'm remembering correctly, because Kirk Spock is probably my least favorite of the trio ships, just because Bones is my favorite. So I just get more invested in pairings with them. Where I think in the novelization, there's a Vulcan term, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, because I will mess it up and I will be mocked relentlessly, but where it means my friend, my brother, my lover. And Spock uses that to refer to Kirk in the novelization that Gene Roddenberry wrote.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, and let's go there.
It's so interesting because I know, not to hijack what you were saying, but with some of the original feedback and pushback, Roddenberry himself did say, in an interview after revealing that he had cast Shatner as Kirk partly on the basis of his performance as Alexander, Roddenberry talked about fans seeing a possible parallel between Alexander and Hephaestion and Kirk Spock. So I assume we're talking about Shakespeare or something. So Roddenberry, making that comparison, he said, yes, there's certainly some of that, certainly with love overtones, deep love. The only difference being the Greek ideal we never suggested in the series, physical love between the two. We certainly had the feeling that the affection was sufficient for that, if that were the particular style of the 23rd century. Then it says, Roddenberry looked thoughtful. That's very interesting. I never thought of that before. Roddenberry seemed open to those interpretations. And then you have his personal assistant for 17 years, Susan Sackett, who said, I think she even sent a letter to a UK fan club president saying that Gene and the executives at Paramount feel that this is harmful to the Star Trek concept, since this was never the intention in creating the series. And even David Gerald, who is gay, emphasizes that Kirk and Spock are not lovers. They're not even boyfriends. Oh, sorry. I hope he doesn't. I'm sorry. Maybe we should take out my mocking. Let's not, because frankly, however we want to interpret it is how it's going to be interpreted. And that's a big part of why we do this podcast, is that our queer interpretations of Star Trek are valid. So yeah, it's interesting to get the different perspectives from creatives and writers within Trek. And I'm not surprised, knowing this, having read this, that that would pop up in something that Roddenberry would write and put in a phrase that refers to them as lovers, even if unintentionally, like not knowing, not realizing what he was doing. I don't know.
I think that, and I mean, I will say that, and I come back to Star Wars a lot because my other major is in Star Wars. I majored in Star Trek and Wars, and with a minor in Marvel. And George Lucas was very anti Luke Han shipping. Like, none of that. No. I mean, we can have Luke making out with his sister, but Luke can't.
That's not even.
Which I think is also very interesting now is that Mark Hamill has now reclaimed the idea of Luke being gay and has said, like, if you want Luke to be gay, of course he's gay, which I think is like the best way.
That's so awesome
to embrace this. But, you know, it doesn't surprise me that there was such pushback. And I know, and from fans and from the creatives alike. And like I said, I just think about how things have changed now, how we go from that to Simon Pegg when someone's pushing back against Sulu being gay, just saying all the members of the Enterprise are gay. Pretty much. He was like, Kirk's pansexual. We don't know why Bones got divorced. Spock and Uhura never said that they were exclusive. And Scotty and Keen's are. This is a direct quote from him, where he flat out calls Kirk pansexual, and then just it's. And I remember when that quote happened, I think I was like, can I print this out and frame this, or is that just too much? Because
I think I need to find it and do exactly that, just to have it there every time we record QueerTrek, because all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to say that I'm very behind on Discovery. So, but has there been like from the producers being like Star Trek is for everyone, so that's why we included gay characters?
Yeah, and I mean, Aaron Harberts, who is one of the producers, you know, is a gay man. He's no longer on the show. But I think that between the writing staff and creatives that they have, I mean, they're all very socially aware, liberal people that believe that is what Star Trek is as well. And so that's a big reason why they have, you know, Sonequa Martin Green, you know, a woman of color who is the lead, and many more women in the series. And, you know, go listen to Disco Trek, listeners, and all of our talk, because we're pretty we talk about the social issues and some of the things. I don't want to say too much, not knowing where you're at. And
I think I know what you're talking about because I have been spoiled, but I also haven't seen it so I don't want to necessarily shoot my mouth off about something I haven't watched full. So, but I think I know what you're going for, and so we're just going to do like a look of I see what you mean.
And there are multiple places in Discovery where it wasn't a personal, and not just me, but many people did not like the way that certain characters were handled or killed off or etc. So yes, I do believe that this staff is just woke and knew that representation is important and wanted to stay in line with what Star Trek is. And thank goodness, you know, we have our first gay couple, and we're going to spend an episode, I think maybe next month, talking about our favorite Star Trek couple. And again, I'm not going to say too much there because that's a whole other discussion, but it's a big deal that finally, after this struggle to make a queer presence known in Star Trek, and we've gone from basically being banned to being in the series on TV. And despite what anyone wants to say about how the characters are treated in Discovery, it's still a big deal. And that story isn't over. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to in season 2. And I just have to side note that Stamets and Culber aren't the only queer couple in Discovery. There are people in the background. There were 2 women dancing together in Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. And I expect to see more of that inserted throughout season 2.
And this is a total tangent, but when I was at WonderCon, someone asked the question of, will there be a maybe like a lesbian couple or 2 women together in the series? And the producers reply with, we intend to show that, and you may already know who they are. Like, we may have already met them.
Ooh, I got chills.
That's another thing to look forward to. Yeah.
I got chills.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And the thing is, and this is where it's sort of different with other franchises, because there's other franchises that shall remain nameless where they're like, oh, we're going to have gay characters. And I'm like, yeah, when?
Yeah.
You got to put your money where your mouth is. Otherwise, I'm just not going to.
And we were there we waited 52 years.
We waited a long time with Star Trek, but I'm at a point now where I feel like with like all the new shows, I'm like fairly certain there's going to be rep in most of them, if not all of them, because I'm just at a point where I'm like, people who are writing this know that Star Trek is for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And
so we're supposed to be representing this utopian future. I'm at this point where I have faith that we're going to get rep, and it's also because there's diversity behind the scenes as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Diversity in front of the camera, and in terms of the acting. And so I'm at a point now where I'm like, I have faith, and even if right now, like, we're still not like at where the ideal is, like, I trust where they're going with the CBS, the CBS Trek Naissance that I
You're coined a new term.
Trek Naissance. Yeah. You heard it here first. I'm excited about that. And I have to say, just from a purely representational standpoint, the thing I'm the saddest about Star Trek 4 being shelved indefinitely is that we were going to have the franchise's first female director. And my goal one day is to write and direct big franchise movies. So the idea of like a woman directing Star Trek would have blown 2009 Kate's mind out of the water. And so that's the thing I'm the saddest about with the shelving of it. And also just because I really love the reboot cast. I think they all do a really good job.
I will give you this. In our last weekly Trek with our new host, Alex Perry, and Jim Morehouse from Trek Ranks, Jim said he would bet his life savings that we will still get a Star Trek film directed by a woman. So
we will. I just was excited about this.
Oh, totally. One. I mean, this is like the story of like queer and women Star Trek fans is that, like, but I mean, reality is that the future is very colorful and the future is queer. And we're gonna see that eventually, hopefully, in our lifetimes. I mean, I'm 38 this year, so I'm half over.
I don't think Paramount has any plans to shelve Star Trek permanently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I do think that another movie will be made soon-ish, but it may not be with the same cast or whatever.
Yeah, I have to say that I am in the Carl Urban and John Cho camp, and that I believe it will happen, because John Cho had a very emotional quote about how the last one was sort of, there's the cloud hanging over it of the passing of Anton Yelchin. So they all want to do another one. They want to do another one so that they can have like a good memory of that. Yeah. And Carl Urban was very in a I think it was like 4 weeks, maybe 3 weeks after the Pine walked away from the negotiating table, he did a con where he was like, oh, we're going to do it. It's going to happen. And in Carl Urban and John Cho, I always trust, because they have yet to let me down. So
yeah, there's no actual confirmation anywhere that Star Trek 4 has been shelved.
Yeah, so it was a Deadline article. I think I actually wrote it up on the Mary Sue, and I was grumpy about it, but I was just covering what the general idea was. So
yeah,
because whenever time there's Star Trek news, I'm like, can I write about it? Can I write about it? Can I write about it?
I noticed that because I followed your link on your Twitter, and it had like all the articles that you've written, and it was like Star Trek, Star Trek, Star Trek, Star Trek. I find them all.
Yeah, Stars, Trek, and Wars are like my favorite.
Yep. It was all there. Okay, so
that was a tangent. We got to get back on track.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, we're about an hour and a half. Well, maybe a little less in because we started a bit late. But is there anything about / fiction that you wanted to talk about that we haven't?
Oh,
that won't take an hour.
I think that I'm just this is gonna be a general defense of fan fiction in and of itself. Is that I think it's not like I mean, there's 50 Shades of Grey, obviously, but it's not publishable, but it's a very excellent way of practicing and like learning how to write and learning how to tell a story. Because you're basically, you put it out there you're going to get anonymous feedback from people who could not pick you out of a lineup. They're not and they're going to tell you exactly how they feel. And I have to say, some of the best writing experiences I've had have been writing fanfic with online friends, and they're giving me honest like feedback. And they're like, I feel like I've grown so much as a fiction writer that way. And like professionally, I've applied so much of what I've learned from like media analysis and media crit from fandom to my professional life currently. So there's just so much, I think, about fandom discussion and fan fiction that gets misrepresented as just like a purely, oh, you just want these two characters to make out. Oh, you're just missing the point. And it's like, no, the discussions women are having in fandom are amazing. And they're so, and they're all amazing. Like from like the flailing at each other and making really weird parodies to the eloquent, elegant metas where people are like pulling in analyses and parallels from Shakespeare and whatnot. Women and the way they engage with fandom is fascinating and important. And writing fan fiction is an excellent way of honing your creative skills and honing your talent. And there are published writers who are open about the fact that they got their start writing fanfic. And so I think that fandom and women's engagement with fandom has been grossly misrepresented. And I think we need to.
I was talking to myself. I was just like, especially with Star Trek.
Oh, yeah, especially with Star Trek.
Yeah, thankfully we're having these conversations and bringing to light the critical role that women played in the sustainment of Star Trek and the development of fan involvement, whether it's /fic or conventions. That's all here primarily because of women.
Or cosplay even.
Yep.
But yeah, just fandom and women's involvement in fandom, I think, is something that, and in media, it's actually starting to change in young adult novels, because we have stuff like Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell and Geekarella, and then the follow-up Princess and the Fangirl by Ashley Poston, which is actually sort of based around the Star Trek fandom. And I'm not going to plug that because it's beside the point. But yeah, if you had the same reaction to Benedict Cumberbatch's casting as I did, which was a little bit grumpy, you probably will like Geekarella. And so I think in young adult novels, we're getting novels that are centered on young women in fandom. And I would love to see like a Big Bang Theory about women. I would love to see a movie, like a comedy, like a rom-com about a young woman in fandom. But especially because a lot of these stories about young women in fandom are queer stories. But like I met my first girlfriend through fandom. So I think it would be great to have these stories told, because not only would it normalize the idea of the presence of women in geek spaces, but also it would also like honor the contributions of women in these spaces, because a lot of these fan campaigns and a lot of these fandoms are built by women. So you can thank your favorite TV show like keeping like X on the air probably because a woman was behind a fan campaign.
Yep. Lots of conversations to continue to be had. I wanted really quickly, I had written down some /fic websites and fanfic websites. One of those was Archive of Our Own, which you mentioned, which was archiveofourown.org. And I'm going to let you, do you have any others that you recommend?
Archive of Our Own is, I think, the best of the best. You can probably still find some fanfic on LiveJournal if you know where to look. If you don't, a lot of people don't like fanfiction.net, but I got my start there. So I think there's some good fanfic there, but most of like the best of the best are on AO3, Archive of Our Own. Right now. And then you can also find it on Tumblr. So if you're still on Tumblr, there's still fanfic out there. There's some great fanfic out there. And I'm trying to think if I have any like really good Star Trek fanfiction outside of the coffee shop fic, which was amazing. And I literally brought it up in a professional article because I was
sorry to interrupt you. Is it pretty easy? Like if I put in like coffee shop / fic Star Trek? Like, will Google?
If you go on Archive of Our Own, go to pick whatever Star Trek subset you want to go into. Then go to like the search within and type in coffee shop, a tag that'll pop up. That'll be like alternate universe coffee shop and cafe. Click on that.
Okay.
It's all there.
Super easy to find, especially on that website. But I just Googled Star Trek /fic and it brought up fanfiction.net and Archive of Our Own and squidge.org.
I do not know what Squidge is actually. So
I don't know.
Investigate that. It's going to be my investigative reporting piece for the week.
But lots of resources there. Should you want to go find of your own.
All ratings, all pairings, anything that you possibly want. There's even tags to filter out specific warnings, because a lot of on Archive of Our Own, they'll warn for like really big triggers. So you can, if you don't want to read death fic, then you can make sure that you don't read fic where like one of the main characters dies. Because let me tell you, I read a Kirk McCoy fic where McCoy died, and I cried myself to sleep that night. I was crying so hard.
Wow. Oh God.
I was like, oh, this popped up, and I'm just going to read it because I hate myself apparently.
I don't know if I can handle that.
Yeah, so you can. They warn for that in all the big triggers they warn for usually. So
that's good.
And you can also awesome. There's just. Fan fiction is such a wide, weird world, and there's criticisms to be had of certain subsets of fan fiction, and you have to be cognizant and think about, how is my writing, like, is my writing being problematic in any way? And there's definitely problematic fic out there, but at the same time, like, there's the same sort of like level that you'd apply to your favorite TV show, you can apply to fanfic, because it's an art form. So. Yeah, that's my little disclaimer at the end, that not all fic is good, but the community around fan fiction is fascinating.
Sounds like the Star Trek community in general. Like, some of Star Trek is not good, but a lot of Star Trek is.
Yeah.
So I hate to like go back to Alyssa's article. I should have had Alyssa on with you, and I
would have cried and fangirled the entire time.
So we'll do an episode with Alyssa, and then we'll have both of you on.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Because it just will be great. There's much more conversation. I feel like because we kind of, and still a great episode. I love the discussion that we had.
I think we could get a little deeper into it though.
Yes, I think we could go deeper, and I think that having both of you would be super awesome.
I'd like to spend a little more time like diving into it too and getting.
I mean, I would love to like provide some more links and stuff like that.
Yes, I would love links. Links are the best.
We'll get links and add links to the show notes too, but I think we'll definitely have you back and do even more of a deep dive.
I mean, the one thing that I can come back to with this is that in my college experience, there was a thing where students could teach like mini classes, and there was a regular fan fiction class that was.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, I didn't take it because I was too shy about showing my own writing, but at the same time, I sat in on one of them, and it was like people were discussing different elements of fics as critically as they would discuss an essay in an English class, and it was like, this is so cool. And we
need more of that. More of that kind of stuff. I love Absolutely. It. This has been super enlightening, and I referenced Alyssa's article also. I had 2 quotes that I pulled from it, but I'm actually just going to share one because I'll talk about the other when we have Alyssa or when we have both of you. But I think that this quote works really well talking about /fic. And this is from the woman she interviewed, Dee, who was there at the very beginning. She said, "You are the one shaping the traditions of fandom. You have inherited the kingdom. Bless you for keeping it vibrant." Okay, I'm going to cry. Jesus. "Bless you for keeping it vibrant, growing, alive. In 50 years, you will be the ones who are remembered for molding it and handing it down to the future. It probably doesn't feel like it now, but you are making history." Okay. Didn't plan to cry.
Oh God, no, that's what I love. But I got to say, the crying is something that like, that's also important, I think, because this is something that it should, I don't know. I feel strongly about crying about fandom things.
It's so, yes. And it's healthy and good. I tell you guys, I have cried more in the last year over bad and good things than I have, I think, in my entire life. But that quote, I just especially love because it applies to just so many facets of Star Trek fandom, of queer Star Trek fans, of fanfic writers, queer or straight, whatever you are. Like, it's just so, it just resonates so very deeply.
Yeah, it does.
That, you know, Star Trek is in our hands now. And that is another reason why it's so important that our Star Trek reflects who we are now.
And isn't this next generation of Trek Naissance, to coin a phrase, being written by people who have grown up watching Star Trek?
Mm-hmm.
Similar to how the new Star Wars movies are being written and produced by people who grew up watching Star Wars. So
Yep.
And I have to say something. The new show that was announced. I can't remember how.
Michelle Yeoh, the Section 31-ish.
Section 31.
Type 1.
2 women
Untitled, yeah.
are show running that.
Yes.
And
yes.
that's so important. And I remember just like I was writing it up, and I like was scrolling through the articles, the press releases and stuff like that to write it up, and I saw the names, and I like stared for a solid minute, and I like looked over. I had to like take a moment where I was like wiping my eyes, and like, yes, this, and I think it's just so important, especially it's like a woman-led show, and it has female voices behind it, and I just think that's so neat.
I tweeted about this stuff. I mean, when I said woman-led, I meant like, you know, written by, produced by women. Young Kim and Erica LaPolte were both writers on Discovery, and they did an amazing job. They wrote, what did they write? The Brightest Star short trek, which was the Saru focused one, which was my favorite one. So I tweeted about it, and I quoted the article and said, you know, this is now a woman-led show with, you know, a woman person of color who's the main character. And, you know, it's about time, because sure, you can say that Discovery is women-led and that it has such a high amount of women actors, and there have been women working behind the scenes. But this is something different.
Just not as prominently.
Yeah. I was listening to Women at Warp's recap of the short treks, and they actually specifically said that, like, in the first season of Discovery, there were maybe like 2 episodes written by women. It was something small, like it's much less than you'd think.
I mean, the thing about Star Trek and women writers, though, I will say, is that the lowest percent of of those series that are completely finished, I think the smallest percentage of episodes that were written by women was Deep Space Nine at 17%.
Wow.
And Doctor Who, compared to the new run of Doctor Who, had less than 1% of their episodes of the new run written by women.
Wow.
Well,
I like did the math on all of this because I guess I can sort of vaguely announce that I'm working on a project independently about the feminist history of Star Trek. And so this is something that I've been researching. And so, I mean, this, I guess, is a general call that if you have stories that you'd like to share about your experience as woman and Star Trek, I should just like tweet at me and I will get in touch with you, because this is something that I think needs to be shared, especially while so many of these women are still with us.
Yeah.
Because it's in Alyssa's article, Dee, the fan she speaks about, has sadly passed on. So I think it's important that while some of these women are still with us, especially the great Nichelle Nichols, that I want to share some of these stories so they can know exactly how many women there.
Yeah.
I'm such a.
If we cried an episode, we have succeeded. Although I think this is the first one I've cried on. Maybe, I don't know. QueerTrek is awesome.
It is awesome. I download the episodes so I could listen to them when I'm flying home from.
Yay!
It's a good plane listen. It's a good listen anytime.
Well, thank you for being a listener and a guest. I guess we'll go ahead and close out, but we will say now we will have you back. We will deep dive more. We will
Absolutely.
make plentiful notes. We'll have an outline. We'll make sure that we stick to the task at hand. But guys, this is our first time talking to Kate, so we were jazzed. And when you're friends, that's what happens. And to be quite honest, maybe just get used to it, because we're not perfect, and I care much more about getting to know other people in the queer community that do really awesome things than I do sticking to like a note by note outline for a podcast. I hope that's okay with you, Marty.
Yeah, totally okay with me.
All right, so we kind of already talked about where we can find you on on social media.
Yep.
But
at Kate_S_Gardner on Twitter.
Perfect. And then the Mary Sue, is it .com?
MarySue.com, yeah.
Okay.
And I just, again, shout out to the folks at the Mary Sue, because they are wonderful people, and all of us have great thoughts about fandoms. So really, just if you're going to go there and you're reading anything about fandom, you're going to get a great perspective.
Yep, I endorse. And there's sometimes your articles are controversial out there. I see lots of reactions. I mean, I'm a feminist, so I tend to take your side. But
I meant to ask this earlier when you introduced it. The Mary Sue it's feminist focused, but that doesn't mean it's just for women, correct?
No, actually,
because I consider myself a feminist. So
it's for if you're a feminist, if you believe in the intersection of social justice and pop culture, we'll find something for you on the site. We do talk about the patriarchy and misogyny and sexism, but hopefully in a way that if you like you can understand where we're coming from. And I mean, not to we have one of the editors in chief is a guy, so it's not that it's just all
Okay, perfect.
Well, and even if you're not a feminist, I still think you should go read some of these articles. Like, at least be open-minded, because you can disagree with whatever you want, and it's totally fine and valid if there's some things you don't agree with or you can't fully accept, but at least expose yourself to what's being said on the website, because it's important. And as a woman, I appreciate when excuse me, when people at least take the time to do that. The word feminism throws so many people off, and why? I don't know. Misogyny.
There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, we didn't. Okay, we'll stop with the tangents. So we said where to find you on Twitter. We got the MarySue.com. Marty, you're out there somewhere. Where are you?
I'm on Twitter at Time Travel Marty, and on Facebook too. I think I don't remember anymore.
You're somewhere out there. Yep, I am on the Twitters at LLA Posper, and the show is at QueerTrek Pod. And then you can find our main show just at the tricordertransmissions.com, or you can put in QueerTrek.thetricordertransmissions.com, something like that. Just Google us, you'll find us. We're there.
And if you're looking for more fan fiction content, my other show, Reading Trek, we did an interview with some fan fiction writers. It's under the STOV interview supplemental episode, I believe. So
awesome.
For that, if you want more Star Trek fan fiction content.
Yes. You need to do some more fanfic stuff. I demand it.
Yeah, we do. We're working on it.
All right. I have to do one final shout out here that I have promised for 3 different episodes, and I never remember to do it. So, my dear friend, Nerdy Gal 33, who has this really awesome name, Heather. Of course, my favorite name, since it's also mine. She is the one who gave us our ending tagline. So shout out, Heather. Thank you so much. I'm sorry it took me 4 episodes to get around to saying thank you.
Speaking of things we always forget to mention, we have a Facebook group called QueerTrek.
Thank you.
That you can join on the Facebook. It does require 3 questions to answer before you join, but it's easy stuff like, are you queer? Do you like Star Trek?
Feel free to say, I listened to the podcast. That will help. We've been getting a lot of weird spammy stuff.
If you say you listen to the Queer Trek podcast, it's almost a guaranteed in.
Yeah, instant ad. But yeah, come join us. We're a bunch of lovely folks, and a lot of us get together at the Star Trek Las Vegas convention in August every year. And we tend to do certain events. Our network did a Night of Diversity party, which was tons of fun, celebrating all the queer folk and everyone who is an ally. So that's all that good stuff. Stay tuned down the road for more Kate and more /fic talk and deep diving, because we promise you'll have it. In the meantime, we will see you in February. And until then, live, love, and prosper.